Nelson Mandela's life is one of the most remarkable stories of courage, endurance, and reconciliation in modern history. It is the story of a boy born in a small rural village in South Africa who grew into a global symbol of freedom and justice. His journey from tribal royalty to political prisoner and finally to the first Black president of South Africa reflects the struggle of an entire nation against oppression and its long walk toward equality. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in the village of Maviso in South Africa's Eastern Cape. He belonged to the Thembu royal family, part of the Xhosa-speaking people. His father was a local chief, and young Mandela was groomed for leadership within his tribe. However, his life took a different direction after his father's death, when he was placed under the guardianship of the Thembu regent, Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo. It was during this time that Mandela was exposed to both traditional leadership and Western education. He attended mission schools, where he was given the name Nelson by a teacher, as was common in colonial education systems. He later studied at Fort Hare University, one of the few institutions of higher learning available to Black South Africans at the time. Although he was expelled for participating in student protests, this experience marked the beginning of his lifelong commitment to political activism. Mandela later moved to Johannesburg, where he worked as a clerk and studied law. He completed his law degree through the University of South Africa and eventually began practicing law with his friend Oliver Tambo. Together, they would later play a crucial role in South Africa's liberation movement. During Mandela's early adulthood, South Africa was increasingly governed by racial segregation policies that would later be formalized as apartheid. The system of apartheid was designed to enforce strict racial separation and ensure white minority rule over the Black majority. This system affected every aspect of life, including where people could live, work, and study. In 1944, Mandela joined the African National Congress, a political organization dedicated to fighting racial discrimination. Alongside leaders like Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, he helped form the ANC Youth League, which pushed for more direct and militant resistance against oppression. At first, Mandela believed in non-violent protest, inspired by figures like Mahatma Gandhi. The ANC organized strikes, boycotts, and civil disobedience campaigns. However, as government repression intensified, Mandela and others began to consider more forceful methods of resistance. By the early 1960s, the South African government had outlawed many anti-apartheid organizations, including the ANC. Mandela went underground and became involved in organizing sabotage campaigns against government infrastructure, aiming to pressure the regime without causing loss of life. In 1962, Mandela was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison for inciting strikes and leaving the country illegally. While he was in prison, authorities uncovered evidence linking him to broader resistance activities. In 1964, during the famous Rivonia trial, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. In his powerful courtroom speech, Mandela made it clear that he was prepared to die for his cause. He stated that his ideal was a free and democratic society in which all people could live together in harmony and equal opportunity, a vision that would define his legacy. Mandela was sent to Robben Island, a harsh prison located off the coast of Cape Town. There, he spent 18 of his 27 total years in prison. Life on Robben Island was brutal. Prisoners were subjected to hard labor, poor food, and minimal contact with the outside world. Yet Mandela remained steadfast, continuing to educate fellow prisoners and maintain discipline and hope among them. Over time, Mandela's imprisonment turned him into a global symbol of resistance against apartheid. Around the world, activists called for his release, and economic sanctions against South Africa increased. The apartheid government tried to suppress his influence, but instead, his name became a rallying cry for justice. Even within prison walls, Mandela demonstrated remarkable leadership. He studied Afrikaans to better understand his oppressors and to communicate more effectively with prison guards and officials. His ability to remain calm, disciplined, and strategic earned him respect even from some of his captors. As international pressure grew in the 1980s, the South African government began secret negotiations with Mandela. They offered him freedom in exchange for renouncing armed struggle, but Mandela refused unless all political prisoners were released and the ANC was unbanned. In 1990, after 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela was finally released. His release marked a turning point not only for South Africa, but for the world. Crowds gathered in celebration, and Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison with his fist raised, symbolizing both victory and continued struggle. Upon his release, Mandela immediately committed himself to peaceful negotiation rather than revenge. He worked closely with South African President F.W. de Klerk to dismantle apartheid and transition the country toward democracy. Their cooperation, despite deep historical tensions, was crucial in preventing widespread civil conflict. During this period, South Africa experienced intense political violence as various factions struggled over the country's future. Mandela's leadership was instrumental in maintaining dialogue and preventing the collapse of negotiations. After serving one term, Mandela stepped down from the presidency in 1999, demonstrating his belief in democratic leadership and peaceful transition of power. He continued to work on humanitarian causes, including HIV/AIDS awareness, peace building, and human rights advocacy. Nelson Mandela died on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95. His passing was mourned around the world, with leaders and citizens alike honoring his extraordinary life. Today, Mandela is remembered not only as a political leader, but as a symbol of moral courage. His life story continues to inspire movements for justice and equality across the globe.